Please note the views and opinions expressed during RealBlackTalk.com do not necessarily reflect those of the staff and management of CCTV.
Welcome to Spare Change News TV. My name is Sam Baltrusis. I'm the editor-in-chief of Spare Change News. Joining me now is Cassie Hurd.
Hi, Sam.
Hello, Cassie. Good to see you again. Cassie's been on the show before. This is actually going to be the last edition of Spare Change News TV. I have resigned as the editor-in-chief of Spare Change, so we're going to make this extra special. And my goal is to shine a light on the upcoming rally, which is happening on October 8th, which is the 1-year anniversary of the closing of the Long Island Bridge. So tell me about that event, Cassie.
So on Thursday, October 8th, the Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee is having a day of observance and action. We'll begin our day at 9:30 at City Hall, where we'll have a speak out and a few folks who were on Long Island who were displaced, who are experiencing homelessness and still are. We'll talk about the negative impact it continues to have on them in their day-to-day lives and in getting out of homelessness. From there, we'll at 11 be at Church on the Hill, where we'll have Peniel Joseph, who is a professor at Tufts University.
Wow.
And he'll be speaking on the need for folks to organize and rise up and take action. And we will also have a few other folks speaking as well. And then at noon, we will be going to the State House to talk about the need for addiction treatment to be reinstated, since so many programs have yet to go back online following the closure for a variety of reasons, and as well as family homelessness in Massachusetts and the current actions the governor's trying to take.
So looking back, coming up on a year, things have changed, and some positive things. Tell me some of the things that need to be worked on currently.
Well, the city has replaced the number of beds they had on Long Island in terms of shelter for folks experiencing homelessness for both men and women. They've built the Southampton facility for men, and they've renovated the Woodsmullen facility for women. However, they're providing a bed or a cot or a mat, but they aren't providing dignified services for folks. People are going in not totally clear of what is expected of them in terms of rules and restrictions. People are treated, as second class. They are not treated as someone who is a guest. They're treated, I don't want to say prisoner because that's terrible, but they aren't treated well.
Right.
They aren't treated with respect. So we are asking that the city upgrade services, train employees in trauma-informed care so they can properly work with folks while they're needing the shelter as a safety net and needing to reside there. Beyond that, we're also asking that people have the ability to organize so that guests at the shelters are able to air their grievances without any sort of retaliation from shelter staff.
To give you some insight, I'm actually getting a lot of emails from guests at the shelters talking about services, and it's not good.
Right.
Yeah, and so we have to listen to our people, and we have to offer. So it was trauma informed. So like basically, if there's PTSD related issues.
Yep. So you're understanding that the individual has gone through trauma in their life, and because of that, they're going to be coming from a different place, and they're going to be needed to be treated differently because of this past trauma.
Right.
And Long Island triggered so many folks, and it was such a terrible experience, and it showed glaringly how the city was not providing the services in this way, that uprooting people with 3 hours notice, not telling anyone where they were going, is in no way providing trauma-informed care.
Yeah, so just to kind of give you some PTSD, there's a lot of symptoms, like hypervigilance is one of them. There's a lot of symptoms that were not recognized. So I've talked to people who were traumatized from what happened on October 8th, and that triggers their PTSD, which sends them in a downward spiral. So that is something that needs to be addressed, because we have a lot of people in the shelter system who had traumatic events in their past that led them to where they led them to homelessness. So that is, in my opinion, that is the one of the main things that we need to address. Also, addiction services. So they're kind of being put at Southampton Street Shelter.
So Southampton is a wet shelter, meaning folks can go in under the influence. Men can go in under the influence now that it's a male shelter. But they're having 2 recovery programs for folks seeking recovery and treatment from addiction. So having people intermingled with those who are in active addiction is in no way fostering an environment for folks into recovery.
Right. Yeah, I had I went to a wet shelter in Seattle. I was with the International Network of Street Newspapers. We did a summit, and where they had they basically dealt with alcoholics who were active in the shelter, and it's not a type of environment where someone's trying to get sober, and you're having some people that are active. So I'm actually getting a lot of emails about that.
Yeah.
People that are trying to get sober, and they're in an environment where it's not sober at all.
Right.
And that's not good. Okay, so getting back to the event. So what do you want to the rally? I think it's really important for the community to step up and to join the rally. Can they join along the way?
Yes, of course. Folks are more than welcome to join at any point along the way. So it's the bullet times are 9:30 City Hall. We'll then be marching up through the Common to Church on the Hill, which is 140 Bowdoin Street, right across from the State House, that side street there. We'll be in the sanctuary until noon. And from then we'll be going over to the State House, and we'll be right by the steps at the State House. And after that, we'll be having a community lunch.
Awesome. So Boston Homeless Solidarity Committee has done a lot of things. Like, tell me in hindsight, what has some of the high points this past year from your group?
I think we had several events. We had a march in April, which was really amazing. We started at Woods Mullen and went past several shelters in the city and ended at the State House to demand action. We also had a City Hall 6-month action where we went to the mayor's office to demand answers as to why shelter beds had not been replaced and addiction services had not been replaced. Those were amazing. There were so many folks, both from the community at large and folks currently experiencing homelessness or formerly who had experienced homelessness, who came and spoke out and rallied and brought their loved ones with them. And most recently, we had a barbecue on July 3rd for folks experiencing homelessness. We had about 350 people show up.
That's amazing.
Yeah, we were able to feed everyone that came. It was so great because the holidays are such a difficult time for folks experiencing homelessness. It's not really a day of joy. The shelter may provide you with something, but you're still not with your loved ones. It's not really a celebration. It brings back bad memories. So we wanted to be able to have a day that was really a celebration of a community of people.
I heard that there was a marriage or marriage proposal.
Yes, there was marriage. There was a wedding in the morning, and then following that we had music, and we had a bunch of different resource folks were there providing, different services, and we had food and dessert. It was great. And then following that, the report will be released on Wednesday. We had a hearing, or a working group, excuse me. It was initially a hearing at Boston City Hall. The City Council, Councilor Presley, put forward the hearing on the closure of Long Island and the continuing negative impact it's had. So the report will come out, and several folks from service providers to folks who are in the shelter system currently or who are on Long Island testified.
That's extremely important. I think that there's a ripple effect, and I think there was some good. Like, do you feel like that you, like not you specifically, but the group as a whole made an impact to sort of inspire change? I think, where folks are feeling so disempowered because they are so marginalized, I think knowing that there's an organization and seeing that there are folks stepping up and speaking up, and that if there are negative repercussions in terms of within the shelter, that they will be addressed. Right.
So people can gain a voice and have a platform to speak up for themselves and for their community of folks.
I have seen the community rise up and really take a stand after Long Island. So it was, in some ways, it was not, what happened was horrible, what happened to those people. But the positive from it is the private sector rising up and actually taking action and giving a voice to the community. And there's still a lot to do. And I think if you could pick the top 3 things that need to be addressed, what would you say?
Well, one, I would say we need truly affordable housing. In order to get folks out of the shelter and into housing, we need housing that is affordable to folks with a subsidy. You know, people are getting on the top of the housing list, getting their voucher and then not able to find anything.
Right.
So if the city could fund a voucher program to find housing for these folks, that would be amazing. More dignified treatment for folks. There are always going to be people who are going to need the safety net. If we had all the housing in the world in Boston, you know, people are still going to need that safety net for a variety of reasons. They're going to end up, hopefully, for a much shorter amount of time in a shelter. But while they're there, you know, it's so important for folks to retain their dignity and know that there's hope and be able to get out of the situation. So I think that is amazingly important. And then getting the recovery and treatment beds back online. You know, people need to be able to get stabilized and detox and get treatment and recovery. People are dying every day. You know, the number in 2014 was 1,047 deaths related to opioids, and it's undoubtedly gone up since then.
Yeah, I mean, we're losing people left and right that we know from the recovery community, and it's affecting the homeless community as well. And so it's those I would pick those 3 as well. So affordable housing, dignified treatment, and addiction services. So Cassie, thank you so much for your time.
Sam. I appreciate it.
So next up is George. So joining me now is George. George, what's your last name? Capanagua. Sorry. So that's kind of like my last name, Baltrusis. So George is a longtime activist, formerly homeless. He works with Jim Stewart in many cases. But tell me about, so you actually were on Long Island at one point.
Yes.
So tell me about that and what's happened since being on Long Island.
Okay. It's kind of what I'd like to do is just briefly talk about what happened, and then I can more in detail talk about my experience at Long Island. You and Cassie were talking about trauma.
Right.
And in a 1-year period, my mother passed away. I lost a business that I worked years for, and my wife and kids left me. So that started the downward spiral. And with that, I was an alcoholic.
Right.
So that's kind of what led to my homelessness. And in the beginning, when I first became homeless, I was kind of on the streets of Boston. I didn't know anything about homelessness or, you know, the services or whatever. It's when you're homeless, it's a process. And one of the places I would go would be Long Island to get off the streets, especially in the wintertime, the severe weather. And at Long Island, you could get a bed, you could get a hot meal, you know, and it was a relief from the cold. And when I was at Long Island, and Cassie and you were talking about the quality of people that serve, and of course, every shelter situation is different, and you don't always have people with the kind of training they need. But the importance of it was there was a counselor there that reached me.
Right.
That took that extra step and talked to me. You know, I told him my situation and what happened to me, and he sort of guided me to Cambridge, where I eventually wound up in Jim's shelter. But the process is getting people in recovery. To me, and this is my personal opinion, there's kind of 3 major contributing factors to homelessness. Of course, there's others, but it's kind of alcohol, drugs, and mental illness, you know, that are the largest contributors of it. So it has to be treated in a 3-fold manner. And what happened at Long Island really broke my heart. It really broke my heart. I thought it was inhumane. I thought it was just callous that they could just make a decision in a couple of hours. And once you've been homeless, you have a kindred to other homeless people. Doesn't mean you love every homeless person in the world, but you become kindred to them. You know what I mean? You care about them. And I would like to see more resources. And personally, I've just lost a daughter to addiction, and I would like to see more emphasis. There is an epidemic of heroin going on.
I know.
And it knows nobody. It doesn't care if you're rich or you're poor or it rips families apart. It causes homelessness, a lot of overdosing. So my emphasis and my plea of someone that just celebrating, I think, 24 years of recovery is service and qualified people.
Right.
I was really, really touched by Pope Francis and all the work that he put in at Congress, talking to Congress, serving at a homeless shelter. If you can't be involved with the least, can you be involved with the most? We have services, and God knows there's many dedicated people that have really dedicated their lives to the cause of homelessness, but we can do so much more. If the public will is there, and the reason this rally is so important is dignity. Isn't a home part of one's dignity? And if you look at the record of HUD and housing over the last 30 years, to me, it's a national disgrace. It's one of a blemish on this country. And I went through my process of homelessness, and I tried to do the right thing. I didn't always do the right thing, but it was a long process. And I eventually hooked up with Homestart and got housing, and Jim enabled me to work part-time while I was going through this process. But that's kind of like, without tooting Jim's horn, I won't toot his horn, but he treated me always with dignity, and he took a little shot, and he gave me a chance. And I think, most homeless people don't want a handout. They want a handout. You know what I mean? And I think we should put far more resources into the dignity of it. We can make this dignified. We can hire more qualified people. What does it mean? It's good for the economy. Create jobs, get better people. We're always talking about there's not enough jobs. Well, open them up. Spend a few bucks.
There's little things too. For example, Long Island, they had lockers, and there was simple things like having lockers, place to make food.
For someone that carried a bag around with him everywhere he went, you know what I mean? To just have a locker, and they had a decent food service program there too. It was really doing very well, where they would train people to be cooks in their kitchen, and the food was really decent. So, it's kind of the Lord says to take someone in for a night, to take someone in for a night, and that relief keeps you going. There were times in my mind where I said, can I do this? Can I really do this? And believe me, I came pretty close many times of just the battle's too long and it's too hard. But God inspires a little thing, and you'd be surprised, a little kindness, a little gesture from somebody. It's not so much that we don't have services. There are services. But it's that will of, these are the most inflicted people that we have. And as a community, faith-based, business, and I've been a part of many different things where everybody works together. But it just seems to me like the mayor and the governor and, they give lip service to it. And so many years I would see them just, let me go take a picture down at Pine Street. Hey, here, I got a spoon with a homeless guy. I mean, the resources that could be generated if the will was there. And humane services, it doesn't take much to make a humane place. Not a renovated place and with a shower stall. She hit it right on the head. I don't know of anyone that wants their dignity taken away from them. It's about dignity. Homeless people are people. That are usually 90% of the time have had a lot of tragedy, a lot of pain in their life. And, speaking for myself, all I needed and wanted was a chance to get into recovery, to do something worthwhile with my life, to give back, to take my experience and maybe share my story with other people, that maybe I might inspire somebody to action, or, even I believe it's my duty as an American citizen to show up with Jim and Cassie, to be there, to, voice something.
So, George, it was a pleasure talking to you.
Okay.
Next up is Jim Stewart. Very powerful story from George. I think that what I got from it was definitely dignity, and approach people in shelters with dignity, and that things will get better if you approach them with dignity. So, Jim, welcome. Like your sign there. But it's actually, so it's important to be vocal, and Jim definitely is vocal. So tell me one more time about the rally coming up on October 8th.
Well, as Cassie, George, and other people have made clear, it's been a year since Long Island was shut down. Hundreds and hundreds of resources were lost, and really nothing significant has been done to try to put those services back in place. In particular, in the midst of an opioid epidemic, there are over 100 addiction service beds just not online. And all we hear from the governor and the human service secretary is, well, we recognize this is a crisis, but, community resistance makes it hard for us to bring these things back online. And that's just not acceptable. We can't have a public official saying, oh, well, community resistance makes it impossible for us to extend services to people whose lives are at stake. Over nearly 1,050 people died of drug overdoses last year in the Commonwealth. And according to the Department of Public Health, this 2015, we're on pace to have at least the same number of people croak on the streets from drug overdoses as happened last year. And there's just no excuse for the Commonwealth of Massachusetts not to bring resources to the table in a timely fashion. If community resistance is making the problem too difficult, then they should take empty buildings, which do exist on the campus of the Shattuck Hospital, and make services available there. In the middle of an emergency, the governor routinely uses National Guard armories to make sure that people who are impacted by storms or some other disaster can have a place to meet their needs. So if we're serious here in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts about helping people with substance abuse problems take a step towards recovery and have to reclaim their lives, then why isn't the governor opening up resources like the National Guard armories, moving on a crisis basis to bring these desperately needed services? I'm glad everybody's getting a chance to get Narcan. That saves lives, and everybody who's helped make that happen, they have my gratitude and they deserve our applause. But are we going to be content with just making it possible for people to be addicted to Narcan? We need to offer them something else to do besides just, okay, you didn't kill yourself this time, maybe you won't overdose again. We need to be offering them a chance to get out of the cycle, the deprivation, the degradation of addiction. And there's just no reason why the Commonwealth can't be doing more. And we'll be trying to bring a message not only to the State House, but specifically to Human Services Secretary Mary Lou Sutters to say, you have to move it from rhetoric to action. And if you're not prepared to do that, then maybe we need to go and bring the message to the governor. But we've prepared over 1,047 tombstones that has the message about the need for there to be recovery services, and each tombstone has a number for each of the persons who died last year. We're going to be bringing those to Secretary Sutters if we don't get a response that convinces us that the state is going to put resources on the table to help save lives and not just give lip service to this problem.
So you talked about resistance, community resistance. So they're basically saying that the new shelters like Southampton Street Shelter, because it's in the South End, the community does not want recovery beds in their community. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, they tried to cite it in Roxbury and these other places, and the community came out like, oh, we don't want this. We already got this in our community. We always got that in this community. And people are bigoted and ignorant all over the place. That doesn't absolve the state from taking appropriate action to help people who are in crisis. It's not the people in crisis's fault that people have bigoted ideas about them. And if the state is committed to making sure that this crisis is brought under control, they have to sort of move over the bigotry, move over the ignorance, and make something happen for the people who need these services.
So just to reiterate, Long Island was a hub for recovery. There were treatment beds there. There was a strong recovery community on Long Island. It was on an island, so it wasn't in anyone's backyard. Now we have a situation where Southampton Street is actually in a neighborhood.
In USA down there. So.
Yeah, and it's a wet shelter, so you have people that are in recovery coupled with people who are active, and it's a toxic mix.
Yeah, it's a prescription for relapse,
Right.
and then failure doesn't help anyway. People trying to move out of compromised, challenging situations, failure doesn't do anything for them. And so we need to make sure that they have an opportunity to engage the issues that help precipitate the crisis they're in a constructive way that is likely to have a positive outcome. And sticking them in a shelter in the middle of Crackton down there on Southampton Street is just rolling the dice in a way that isn't going to have a good outcome for anybody.
So we're getting to the last few seconds of our show. Again, this has been a pleasure being a part of Spare Change News TV and Spare Change News. And Jim Stewart has been awesome. And go to the events. It's October 8th. And where do they go for the website?
Website, you can go.